Hello, everybody, and welcome to Rollin'-ish. I'm Matt. This is Rick, and today we're going to talk about our homebrew rules that we use at our table. Now, the books give us plenty and plenty and plenty of rules, so why make up our own? Well, honestly, the reason we have some is because the mechanics sometimes don't work for the situation that we're playing, or we want to see how things play out in a different way. One of the things that we live by, while the Matt Mercers of the world live by the rule of cool, and we do that too, we want to see how things play out. We also want the dice to tell the story. So, as a DM, I don't fudge my rolls, which is a way of rolling the dice and being like, oh, I'm going to nat 20 this guy and kill him. I better not do that. I don't do that. I let the dice do the storytelling, and they'll tell you that I hit them hard enough. Especially if I roll pink dice, but that's another story. If we're going to talk about the rules that we have at our table, because they just might work a little bit better in certain situations. Some things we see as like a cinematic scene, and we want the drama of the moment to take over, and sometimes the mechanics get in the way of that. For example, rule number 1, drinking a potion, any potion, is a bonus action. Now, as part of that rule, the sub-rule of that is healing potions may be poured into a dying creature's mouth as an action with a DC 8 medicine check. You should have earmuffed that, because now you know the DC. But we use that rule. Now, drinking one yourself is a bonus action because we figure you could toss back the flask quick enough. But to cradle one's head and open their mouth and pour in a potion, that is going to require your entire action along with the medicine check. What are your thoughts on it?
There's a lot of debate about this between the community, and we ourselves have debated about it for quite a while. I actually like this rule. It makes perfect sense to me from a cinematic point of view, a storytelling point of view, that you could help a member of your party who is down and is not able, who's either unconscious or just not able to drink a potion, that you would be able to use your action to do that for them. Some of the debate is, people consider it a bonus action and or an action of the player who's doing it, because they have to willingly drink the potion, whereas pouring it down somebody's mouth is not them willingly drinking it. I think this is being a little bit too nitpicky. It makes perfect sense to me that if somebody's unconscious or something, that you could pour a potion down their throat to help stabilize them. I like this idea. Whether or not you want to implement it in your games is up to you, but it makes sense to us. So I don't see the harm.
I like the desperation of the moment, right? Like, if this was a real-world scenario and one of my companions just was felled, I would rush over to them and be like, oh my God, what can I do, right? And the first thing I would think of if a healing potion existed in our world is grab one and, come on, and try and pour it into the mouth. And I think that was the moment or the situation that swayed me to use this rule, because I wasn't for the longest time using the pour it in someone else's mouth rule. Bonus action, easy to understand. A lot of tables do that, but I feel like the drama of the moment of trying to get over and use your action to help someone else mid-combat could be super dangerous, because you want to focus fire on whatever you're fighting and to take your full turn, your full action to go and bring someone else back, knowing that you're now not doing damage to the thing. I think that provides for extra heightened drama in the moment.
I think you can also look at it from almost like a military point of view, right? Like everybody's seen tons of military movies and things where soldier goes down, somebody yells medic, somebody runs over to help them, medic comes over, the medic bandages them up, the medic gives them the medicine, right? But in situations like this, like in D&D situations that are somewhat similar, people were like, well, it doesn't make sense for you to pour the potion down the patient's throat. why wouldn't it? Like, it's almost like a medic tending to his patient on the battlefield. It makes sense to me. If I was in an army and somebody went down and I had the thing to help them when they went down, why wouldn't I go and apply that thing? Now, depending on your character might not do that, but just from a general point of view, it makes sense, right? It's not hard to imagine. So,
yeah, and so that's gonna bring us to like the next one, rule number 2 that we use, and that's critical hits. So this again is not rules as written, but if you're familiar with Realmsmith, Jason Acevedo and Realmsmith, or you're familiar with the Dungeon Dudes, they use this rule also, and I love it, so we adapted it to our table.
we actually debated about this one for a long time, even up until recently, like right when these house rules were made. We were still debating it. And I love this rule. It makes complete sense. Why wouldn't the enemy who failed, why wouldn't that result in a success for the opposition?
Right.
That doesn't make... If somebody's trying to like defend an attack, or they're trying to hit you and they miss, they leave themselves wide open. Like, who wouldn't take advantage of that? It just makes sense to me that it provides not necessarily an opportunity, an area of like an opportunity attack when somebody's like passing by you or trying to withdraw, but it makes sense that obviously they would leave themselves open. They missed critically, not just bad, but critically. That's
so
the key word there is critical.
Yeah, what we're talking about here is multifaceted, right? So when we're talking like melee and ranged combat weapons, right? A critical hit, rules as written, is you roll the damage dice and you double it, and then you add your modifier. We don't do that. What we do is you get the full damage count. So let's say you're wielding a long sword with 2 hands, natural damage is a d10. And then you add your modifier to that. Let's say it's +5, right? Standard, rules as written, I would roll my d10. I got a 5, double it, 10, add my modifier.
5, 15.
What we do is we give you credit for the full damage die. So if it's a d10, you get 10 to start with. That's the crit. Then you roll 3, that's 13, plus my modifier, 5, that's 18. We find that this often is going to... I don't know what just happened to our camera right there, but we're back. We're going to find that oftentimes you're going to have more damage output, because it is the worst to critically hit something and then roll your damage, and it is a 1. And you double that, 2. And then you add your modifier.
I think doing it this way is... It's almost... It feels like a reward. And that's what you want, right? You want to be happy that you critically hit. Making it just a standard roll and doubling it, that seems to me to take something away. It doesn't feel like, yeah.
Right.
And plus, it's a critical hit. So you should be able to, in some capacity, maximize your damage output in some way. And by adding the full damage die right off the bat to count as the crit is great, because making them roll for the actual damage die from the weapon that adds on top of the crit, it still gives that chance of you could still roll a 1.
You could.
You know what I mean? So it's
but the damage still feels critical because you got the full die.
Right. It feels fair. Yeah. It makes sense and it feels balanced, because we're giving you this awesome moment of bam, you got this damage, awesome, but you're still rolling to the fates. How much total damage you get is still up to your roll, which I like.
Now, for my mages out there, right, rules as written, critical hit damage is typically reserved for melee combatants, and so they don't really mean much for you as a mage. And so what we do is, I don't care what class you are, you rolling to see if you hit. If you critically hit, it is a critical hit. So yes, that means if you are using a spell like Chromatic Orb, right? Chromatic Orb at first level is 3d8, and you choose the element. If you crit roll that, you're going to get 3d8. You're going to get 24 right off the bat with that first level spell. And then you're going to roll your 3d8. And there's probably people behind the scenes right now watching this and going, that is just too much damage. Good. Because how many big encounters have you gotten into where you are burning those big spell slots against a bigger boss type battle, and then you're down to first and second level spells, and you're like, how are we gonna win against this dragon?
And you're doing single digit damage, and it gives, plus like spellcasters, magic users, in the first what 7 levels at least, you're not really doing much in the ways of damage. I mean, you can pot shot minions and the lower level characters, but you're not really doing anything big against like bosses unless they have a weakness that you can exploit. But like this also gives magic dealer that was in that one. It also gives magic dealers that ability to have that moment, which they don't get very often at all. And even magic wielders who don't specifically tailor in damage spells, who are maybe more like they buff or they enchant more things, but they do have attack spells, it still gives them that opportunity to deal a heavy punch, and everybody wants to be able to have that opportunity in a storyline.
Yeah, and like even if you roll a 1, right? You know, I think back in the day, older versions of D&D, you roll a 1, you'd have to roll again to see if you break your weapon or something like that. I don't do that. I might do that in the moment if you're rolling terribly all game and it's like your second or your third crit miss. I might be like, all right.
There's got to be something that
or maybe you're
occurs from this.
firing a spell or an ammunition into a crowd of people, right? You're aiming at the bad guy, but maybe he's nearly surrounded. You have line of sight, right? But you crit miss. I might go, all right, well, he's got 3 other people around him right now. Roll again and see if you hit somebody else with that 1. I might do that just depending on the moment, but I also don't want to slow combat down because combat takes long enough.
Especially with us, we're very strategic and tactical, so at least we think to date.
And a sub rule or rule number 3 goes hand in hand with this, and this is new. This is something new to us that we just started doing because we've been debating it. It just makes sense. Areas of effect. If one of the players go to make their saving throw on an area of effect spell and they roll a 1, I am going to grab cards from this critical hits deck. So shout out to Nord Games who make these, okay? But they make this deck of cards. It's called Crit Hit Outcomes for Players. And so what I would do is grab this deck, and this deck of cards is broken down into what kind of situation are we dealing with? Is it just a setback? Is it a dangerous encounter? Is it a life-threatening encounter, or is it a deadly encounter? And so depending on the situation, depending on the encounter, it might just be dangerous. So I'll take, since that's like a second level, I'll take all the dangerous and all the setbacks and I'll mix them up. And I'll make the person who missed pick their card, right? And hand it to me. And what's on these cards are broken down into 4 different scenarios. Bludgeoning, piercing, slashing. So depending on the weapon that hits them, what occurs. And then there's magic. So let's say I used a spell on you. You crit failed the saving throw. This one in a dangerous encounter says bombardment. You get triple damage. So typically how we could handle that, and we haven't even established this yet. So this is a very early onset house rule.
It's working. It's still being finished.
Do we triple the damage rolled, or do we give you the damage critically? Meaning, let's say we'll go back to the original scenario, right? We'll do a longsword. Maybe you've got a shield in your hand, so you're swinging the longsword with one hand. Our crit rule is you get the full D8 and then you roll a D8. So this could mean triple damage. Should I give you 3 of these and then let you roll 1? Mm-hmm. Or do you just roll the normal crit damage that we do? You get 1 full plus the roll plus the modifier times 3. So in my mind, I would say I would give you triple the damage die. So if it's a D8, I give you 3 D8. You get 24 right off the bat. Then roll 1.
That
So-
makes more sense to me.
So it's things like that that will do. Now, what happens when I natural one? And I said, earlier that I don't like fudging my rolls. I like to let the dice tell the story. There is another deck called Critical Hits for DMs. So if I roll a natural one, I'm going to look to the table, and if he's the person who gave me the area of effect, I'm going to say, I need you to pick the card for me because I rolled a nat 1. And now he's like, oh my God, yes.
So I get to choose what happens to you.
So he gets to pick it, and he's going to look. What was it? Was it was an area of effect, right? So it would probably be spell. But let's say he goes to that card and it says, you maim your opponent and they lose a limb. I'm going to be like, what limb do I lose?
Yeah, you get to choose.
Right? So Nord Games, check these out. You can get them at your friendly local gaming store, like I did, or you can get them online. But if you can, shop small.
These decks are a really fun way to get more out of your critical misses and hits. Like, everybody likes to do more damage. Of course, that's great. Mm-hmm. Some DMs will even add on like minor side effects, like a weapon breaks or your chart, like something happens and your weapon cracks and you can't expel like a magic charge that's saved up on it or something like that. Like, we all appreciate little things like that. This streamlines it, makes it easy, and makes it so that you don't have to come up with something on the spot. You can just pull out one of these cards, go to the listed effect, and that's what you get. And some of them are great. And some of them are, you wish this deck didn't exist. Because if you critical fail and you know that deck is coming, it's going to be bad no matter what you pull. There's no degrees to it. Even though they separate the situations, it's going to be bad no matter what happens to you.
Yeah, and for rules lawyers out there, I'm not going to knock rules lawyers. I like rules too. But you're like, this is a lot of damage you guys are talking about. What if you're a 3rd level, 4th level party? Yes, that is correct. But what I also do is I almost never use the stat blocks as given, right? Now, I might use a monster manual from Wizards of the Coast, the D&D official. I might use Kobold Press Tome of Beasts. But every one of those stat blocks, they tell you what the average health points are for that monster, and then they tell you what to roll. And so I like to roll my own damage. Now, if I'm dealing with a particularly powerful party, regardless of the level, like you could be a group of level 3s and are just too strong for challenge rating 3 creatures. I might throw something that they might not be ready for at them, knowing that they're powerful, knowing what's at their disposal in terms of what spells they chose, what weapons they found, what magical items they have. I always beef my monsters up. And so I want them to play up because they feel the danger that way. So I'm not worried as the DM if he crits and I'm using this rule to be like, he's going to put a lot of damage up. I want him to win. So I'll be sitting there being like, oh, you crit? Okay, let's go. What are you rolling? And I'll watch intently because I want to see him kill this monster. I'm not the type of DM that's out to kill anyone. If you die, you die. But I'm not trying to murder anybody. Unless I'm playing a bad guy who's a murderer, right? I might aim at the mage or something like that. But like at the end of the day, I want to see them succeed. And to see them being like, oh, shoot, and rolling all this dice and like, I did 26 damage. And you're like, oh my God.
I think that's what it really comes down to, though, is it's the DM's perspective too. You've been playing with this group, even if it's been relatively not too long. You've been playing with this group. You know what they're capable of. You see their character sheets. You know their abilities. You know what they can do. So you can tailor each match and each boss and each fight to be like, all right, how am I going to give them more of a challenge in this fight? If they're level 3 and the threat level's 3, maybe if I put it to 5, it'll be a little bit more challenging. It'll make the boss beefier. They'll get hit a little bit harder. They'll come together as a group. They'll learn tactics. There's so much behind the scenes that you can like nitpick and tailor to each group. But the critical hits, the critical failures, these cards and these decks and these rules just try to make it a little bit more fun for the player. maybe bending a little bit the rules, but not necessarily breaking them. Just being a little bit more creative with things and maybe interpreting them a little bit differently.
Yeah, so shout out to Nord Games for this deck of cards. I feel like people like us are exactly why they make them. We play with them. We're toying with them. We're trying to incorporate them in our rules.
And they've been a lot of fun. They're definitely worth it.
Absolutely. The next rule isn't so much a homebrew rule as it is a house rule that is often neglected, and it's in the Dungeon Master's Guide. So a lot of the streams that I watch don't include this rule, and it makes me sad a little bit because it's an excellent rule and it just makes logical sense, and that's cleaving through. So in the DMG, Dungeon Master's Guide, you're going to find that there are subset of optional rules that you can put into your game, and cleaving through is one of them. And the way that it's written, when you hit a creature and deal damage in excess of its remaining hit points, the remaining damage carries over to an enemy within reach of the melee weapon that is being used, assuming that the original hit would have also hit that creature. So let's say we're fighting zombies. Zombies typically have a AC of 8, right? Their armor class is 8. So let's say that I am a player and I'm taking my longsword or my axe, and I'm going to swing it at this zombie. And I roll a 13 to hit. Well, that definitely hits, right? And then I roll damage, and let's say the zombie had 2 hit points left, and I do something like 9 damage. Okay, well, the zombie takes the 2, and it's down. But because there's an enemy right next to that one, and my original hit roll of 13 exceeds its AC, as I cleave through and I fell that one opponent, I'm still following through on my swing. I'm going to hit that other guy, and he's going to take the rest of the 7 damage of the original 9 I rolled, right? So that's cleaving through. When you're lower level, well, it really doesn't matter what level you are. It's an easy way to clear the battlefield, right? In melee weapons. Now, this isn't going to typically happen with a bolt or an arrow, but if you're wielding a melee weapon in melee range and you're swinging that thing, usually it's slashing damage. I'll call it out, right? Because if you poke somebody with a rapier, are you gonna poke all the way through to the hilt and then stab the guy behind him? Probably not, right? That's piercing damage. But if you're swinging an axe or a sword, cleaving through is something that we do because it just makes sense. But
plus, they have to be grouped up, so they have to be close together. It's not like
there's a lot of ifs.
There's a guy over. Yeah, there's a lot of in order to get this to happen, there's a lot of things involved. Yeah. So it doesn't sound to me like it's this. Because I know right now, as soon as you said that, people are looking it up like, is that true? Is that on there? And there's probably going to be people in the comments debating like, I don't think that sounds right, or that doesn't seem fair to me, but it's in there, and it makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. And it, especially if you're surrounded, because if you're swinging at something, right, mm-hmm. like you said with an axe, you're swinging at something, and you slice through this thing, you're not just going to stop. Your movement's not going to stop the minute you go
Especially
through
like a
him.
Raging barbarian.
You're going to go through, and that movement's going to keep going. If there's something nearby, it makes sense they're going to get hit. Especially if a barbarian's raging's not really,
so
paying attention to that.
Are the enemies close together, right, within 5 feet or 1 square? They're right next to each other. Is it slashing damage? That's my second thing. Does your swing meet or exceed both creatures' armor classes, right? So there's some ifs that are in there that get layered through, and if you connect on them, then yes, it is a nice way to start clearing the battlefield and gaining the upper hand. It's kind of like flanking. That's another rule that we'll use, where you flank an enemy and you both can attack with advantage. It's meant for strategy. Right, so if you're a raging barbarian and you see 2 enemies close together, you might beeline for that guy because you can cleave through. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we use, and that would be our 4th rule. Our 5th one is Dex saving throws. Nothing crazy here, but when successful on a dexterity saving throw, the creature will move 5 feet to an unoccupied space adjacent to where they stood, if available.
Why don't I see this more?
You dove out of the way. You moved.
Why doesn't this happen? I don't see this.
Yeah.
Like I even in watching other people play, when they do a deck save or they do like a rogue to like dodge or something, their character doesn't move. Like how did you? What do you mean? So you rolled in place? You just did a tumble in the same spot? That doesn't make any sense. And you don't. And even we do it too. Mm-hmm. We've neglected on it too. But I'm like, that makes sense. Like if you dodge something or if you save, you're moving out of the way. That's the point. So you got to move, not just go, oh, whoa,
Well,
that's kind of
fireball,
like...
right? Fireball comes and it explodes.
You're going to roll
it
or run.
It incinerates everything there. If you make a dexterity saving throw, what did you do? Dance into one of these, Bugs Bunny style? Or, no, I tried to dive out of the way and I averted some of the blow as I dove. But again, that's is there 5 feet to move you to that is adjacent to where you were standing? And did you succeed? Because if you did, I'm going to move you 5 feet. And that might play to your advantage because you dove out of the way, and now on your next turn to get out of that inferno that is now on fire, you have 5 feet of less movement that you need to move to get out of that area. Right. So for me, it's advantageous to move you 5 feet on a successful dexterity save because it just makes sense.
Yeah, even from a cinematic point of view, I can't imagine somebody dodging a blow and standing still. I don't understand that. That doesn't make sense. Especially if it involves a weapon.
Rule number 6 is spell casting. So when casting a spell, if the player has an extra attack via multi-classing, or maybe they have extra attack for melee in that scenario, or they have bonus action spells, and they want to cast another spell, the spell they choose can only be a cantrip. So, for example, you have a cleric who has a 2nd level magic spiritual weapon, right? It's a bonus action spell. You cast spiritual weapon. The next spell, because you still have an action, the only spell that you can cast is going to be a cantrip, and that's rules as written. Now, I'm using that, but what I'm going to do is tweak it a little bit because as the mage grows in level, they should be able to master some more spells. So, for example, the house rule that comes into play here is once that character reaches 10th level, they can choose a cantrip or a 1st level spell. Once they reach 15th level, they can do a cantrip, a 1st or a 2nd level spell. So, again, this is for when you're using your bonus action to cast a leveled spell. The book says your action can only be a cantrip, nothing higher. I'm saying, yes, but at 10th, incorporate 1st levels.
Right.
At 15th, incorporate 2nd levels. Because I feel like if you're that powerful of a mage, you should be able to use some of those lower level spells at will, right? So I've incorporated that as the rule. Now, what are your thoughts on that as a player? Because it's giving you access to a little bit more.
It is. I like the incorporating the 1st to 10 and the 2nd at 15, especially because at certain points as you level up in these magic classes, you can learn new cantrips, right? You can learn new spells. So you're not necessarily forced to have the same spell cantrip combo every time your turn if you want to try to do damage.
Different spells.
Right, you can do different things. But at the very same time, a lot of the cantrips that you get to choose from don't have much battle. There's not much you can do. It's not really helpful in fighting, a lot of them. I mean, some of them are, but not to the point where we'll turn the tides. You know what I mean? So I like incorporating the 1st because it gives you more options. And as you level up and you're getting more powerful, it shows progression, right? Your character's getting smarter. Your character's getting more proficient in what he does. And their blinders are kind of opening up a little bit more and they're learning more. So it makes sense on a progression level. Plus, you want to feel strong as a wizard, right? Let's be honest. The first couple levels as like a wizard or a sorcerer, you don't feel that powerful. It doesn't come until the later levels. And this kind of helps establish that not only as playing the game goes, but also from a storyteller point of view. You can actually use that to show how your character's getting stronger. So I like it. it also comes down to like what you have access to on if you multi-class. Keep that in mind. If you multi-class and you have access to other, it can be a game changer when it gets to that 10th, 15th
It can be,
level.
depending on how you do it. And as a dungeon master myself, it's like, again, this is a lot of these rules set up my players for success,
Right.
and make it a little bit harder for me to not so much homebrew the monster, but tweak the monster to be able to absorb these blows. But we're not gonna get into a situation where we fight an adult dragon and they're ousted in 1 to 2 rounds. That's not gonna happen here because, first of all, the challenge rating on an adult dragon is going to be somewhere between like 15 and 19. And I'm going to throw those dragons at you at like 6th, 7th level.
It wouldn't exactly be a fair fight.
Right. And the reason I do that, it's like your turns take so long because you're like, if I get hit with 1 breath weapon, I'm down.
Right.
That's how it should be. Like, the dragon should be able to kill you instantly. You should have that fear. You should go into your turn and look around and be like, oh my god, where can I find cover? What can I do? Like, you should have that stress as a player, and I think it makes more fun for you. So I'm fine with extra damage output by taking your cantrip and moving it to a first level spell. Fine. You want to hit me with Chromatic Orb? Do it.
You're going to be hitting big things with it.
You're going to hit me with a magic missile? Go for it. I'm not afraid of your 4d4.
Stop it. Stop.
No, but the point is, at higher levels, at 10th level, you're fighting creatures that have legendary actions.
Right.
So this is my way of giving players legendary actions. Nothing crazy, right? Like, a dragon's going to make a tail attack. They might claw, right? They're not breath weaponing on a legendary action, and neither are you. What are you going to throw a Chromatic Orb at me with the action when you cast Spiritual Weapon or whatever you used as your bonus action spell? Go for it. You should be able to do that. That's like your legendary action. And that's how we treat spell casting. If you're going to cast a leveled bonus action spell, your action can only be a cantrip. At level 10, you can incorporate first level spells. At level 15, you can incorporate second level spells. Because you would have grown and done enough to do that, and that's how we play that.
There's even some players that, and this is a little bit off topic, but there's even some players that play exhaustion with their magic users. Mm-hmm. Like, it expels it's not just crafting components and verbal components and all that stuff. You're expending energy, right? This is magical energy that flows through you, that you can direct, that you can channel, that you can not necessarily create, but you can pinpoint. So it's gonna wear and tear on you, obviously, if you think about it in a realistic sense. So looking at it from that point of view, you make this big spell attack, right? You output all this energy. It makes sense that you're like you're a little bit weaker, so you like try to do something else, and it's not as big an effect because you're not as focused, and you just expelled so much energy on your main attack or whatever it may be. So it makes sense to me from that point of view.
Yeah, like when you read Wish is a 9th level spell. It's the one that people want to get to. As spellcaster, you get access to 9th level spells when you are at your 17th level for your class. And Wish is one of them. And when you read the Wish spell, there's a list of things you can choose from. There's things that you can, talk to your DM about and maybe homebrew what occurs during the Wish spell. But either way, it does talk about how draining it is for a caster to cast that spell. And so to carry it over to your character in all regards, right? Post-battle, giving yourself a level of exhaustion, I think is a good way to roleplay because you're like, guys, I need a rest. I am tired, right? Like, that's fine. And maybe you're not going to be good at jumping from one roof to the next after expending all your energy to cast these spells. It makes perfect sense.
It's draining. Why wouldn't it be draining?
And that's a good segue in my mind to get to the next rule, which is crafting, because crafting also takes time and expends energy. So our crafting rule is during downtime, or maybe an off day when you're not adventuring, you guys, you take it. There's shopping days, right?
You go hunting. Yeah.
Crafting simple items are going to take you 1d4 hours. Regular items, 1d6 hours. More intricate items, 1d8 hours. The die size is going to increase by 1 when crafting during a day which adventuring took place. So
you're already tired.
It's going to be at my discretion as a DM. I don't have a list of items that are simple. I don't have a list of items that are regular or more intricate. But if I'm gonna have you be like, I wanna find some sticks and make some arrows. Great, 1d4. Anyone can whittle, right? You don't need a class for that. But 1d4. All right, it takes you 4 hours, and roll me a d6, right? You're gonna be like, okay, 4. You made 4 arrows.
Okay, but now I want to carve a toy horse for this kid.
That's more intricate.
That's more intricate.
That's going to be a D8. Now, did you adventure that day? Did you travel?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you fight something? All right, well, maybe it's not a D8 to make that toy. Maybe it's a D10 because you're tired, right? Maybe it's not a D4 to sharpen yourself or make yourself some arrows. But by the way, to spend 4 hours making 4 arrows like I just rolled, they better be like the most intricate looking arrows.
Yeah, they gotta have like they gotta be able to like blend in with the background. And
that's me as the DM, right? I'd be like, it takes you 4 hours
because you're bad at it.
You're only making 4, but that's the thing. I'm like, but you're not great at making arrows.
Right? They look clunky.
You cut your finger early on, and so,
or they got a little blood on them.
Yeah, or like you got really into it, and you were, for whatever reason today, you're very into making it look good. So you made 4 arrows in those 4 hours, but you kind of carved like a little vine that wraps around all the way to the fletching, right? Like
right.
You made them look cool. So
or you added more like
right.
like feathers to it to make it more aerodynamic,
right.
or a sharper point to make it sleeker and fly through the air. There's a million things that you could do, but yeah, if you're taking 4 hours to make 4 arrows, but you should probably look into something else.
we let the dice tell the story.
If that's what you want to do, that's fine. But crafting is a lot of people, to me too, they go, oh, I want to craft this, and the DM goes, all right, well, roll whatever, and they pass, and they go, okay, you made it. I'm like, that's not fun. That's boring. Right. That's crafting. That's it. I go out and look for some sticks. I whittle them into arrows. All right, roll a thing. Okay, you made 6 of them.
But how cool would it be, though?
What if you fail?
How cool would it be, though, if you're in combat and you as a player describe, like, hey, I'm going to draw one of the arrows I made earlier today, and I'm going to fire that one. Does it make any difference? No. But suppose you kill with that arrow. Like, there's a sense of
There's
pride.
role play to it.
Yeah, there's role play to it. So there's a sense of like, I made that this morning. That's one of the ones I made, and it just saved us. Like, there's a sense of pride in that, and it's good for your character. Like, you could even go so far as to be like, see that? I made that one. That's one of the ones I made that you guys were making fun of me. It took me 4 hours to make. You're welcome. Or
you can be proficient, roll really well, make a ton of arrows to outfit everybody, or sell the excess and make some gold. There's a lot more to crafting than people give credit. I feel like a lot of people don't put enough attention into that because so much can be done with it from a role play point of view and from a gameplay point of view. Because you could, if you roll really well, you can make arrows for everybody and sell the excess, or outfit a town that you're trying to help, or a guard. There's so much that you can do with it. There's so much extra to crafting. I feel like it's overlooked a little bit. Mm-hmm. You can have fun with it.
That brings us to number 8, crafting healing potions. So first, I would want to see somebody proficient in either alchemist tools and also have alchemy supplies on their inventory. If that is the case, you're proficient in alchemy tools and you have the supplies, then you can craft healing potions. I would say a skin of water, something like that, would be good enough to brew 2 potions. And the other component or ingredient would depend on what you have. So, for example, in our homebrew world, there is this island, and there is this pool of water that is magically enhanced called Everlake. And in the Everlake, there is Everwater. And it is magically infused. It is protected by a creature called the Evermite. And not anybody can just walk over to this lake and just start using it and drinking it, because then everybody would come and just drain this resource dry. So he, in order to even touch his water, asks for an offering of some magical item. Doesn't have to be legendary or an artifact. It could be a common, uncommon magical item, but it's you sacrificing magic to get this magic, right? It's a fair trade for the Evermight. And so in that vein, crafting a healing potion, it's going to take a d6 hours worth to brew a potion if you're proficient in the tools and have the supplies. If you don't have proficiency and you're going to try and wing it, it's going to take you 1d12 hours. It's going to take you technically double the time. So if I'm going to say it's going to take you a d6 and you're not proficient, you're going to try it, it's going to take you a d12. Are the chances that you roll low and make the potion anyway? Sure. But you got to at least have the tools. So proficiency is going to make that proficiency in that skill matter. Because a lot of times at character creation, you get proficiency in a skill, and then you never use that skill. We try to use that, right? So if you're proficient in alchemy, and you have alchemy tools, I'm going to let you make it because it's going to be a D6 for you. Mm-hmm. If I don't have the proficiency, it's going to be a D12 for me. Why are we making me make that potion?
But at the same time, you can also enhance the experience a little bit. You can not necessarily bend or break the rules, but you can have fun with, for instance, crafting a potion, right? Say somebody's not proficient, they have all the tools, they have the ingredients, they want to try it anyway, they're not proficient. They were like, all right, I want to make a greater potion of healing. That's my goal. That's what I want to. So here's the ingredients. I'm going to try it. And they roll really bad, right? And they're proficient. They roll really bad. And it takes a long time to try and make it. Even after that, the time is expended and the energy's put into it. You can even play with the end result because you could have them roll high or low and be like, all right, you either made a greater potion of healing or you made a lesser potion of healing, or just a standard potion of healing. Roll high or low, pick which one you want it to be, and roll. You can have fun with it in that way. Of course, that's getting off on a tangent because that's you specifically having fun with it. But I think it's to stress the point that I think that crafting is overlooked. Mm-hmm. Like, we could have so much more fun with it. But I think people they're not aware of all the things that you can do with it. Or they're just not concerned of making it a fun part of, like, the role play scenario.
Yeah, or like, think about, like, a potion of fire resistance. Can I make that? I would rule you could, but it's going to cost you, right? Like, how are you going to make it fire resistant? Well, I've got a scroll of firebolt or fireball. Can I use that while crafting this potion and I expend it? But I use that heat to infuse my potion, and that's where the resistance comes from. Okay, now you're making a little bit more sense. Do I have a degree in alchemy? No. Am I going to bust out a book and read hundreds of pages on how to brew things? I'm not. But if you're going to be like, hey, I'm going to magically make this potion, it's going to take me I'm going to be like, hey, it's going to take you D12 hours, and how are you going to get that heat resistance? Well, I've got this scroll, or I have this spell prepared, right? I'm going to try and control my firebolt in a way that helps me make this potion. And you're going to make an Arcana check to do that, right? Okay, you're successful at the Arcana check. You can infuse it. It's still going to take you 1d12 hours to make.
Right.
But, like, and that hasn't come up yet, but that's the way that I would utilize something like that.
Well, lately most crafting we're doing is arrows for 4 hours. Right. Apparently, that's what I've been doing. So, but the rule itself is good. It's stable because it leaves room. Mm-hmm. It leaves room for you to play with it, bend it a little bit. You can interpret it even a little bit differently if you'd like. But the rule itself is solid. So what you do with the rule and how you change it is really dependent on the situation and how you are as a DM and what you want to do with it. But the rule in and of itself, as it's stated, it makes sense. It makes sense, and it provides a little weight. Like, if you want to craft something, now you know it's going to take time. Yeah. It's going to take time. So if you get to that castle, that bad guy you're trying to raid or whatever, you're going to be like, hold on, before we go in, I'm going to sit on the step and whittle some arrows. No, you're not. Because guess what? You're going to be camping there for the next 4 to 6 hours. So it provides a lot of leeway, but it's a solid rule.
Especially if it's something simple, that's part of your rest. I don't care. That's fine. You got a long rest. You're going to be sleeping for 6-7 hours, on average.
Or just relaxing by the fire. And people have hobbies, they whittle.
Rest.
Sure.
All right, maybe your party needs a short rest to heal, but you have all your health, or you're fine with what you have. All right, well then use that short rest
To make something.
To make something.
Yeah.
And if it's a D4
Perfect.
and you roll a 4, you could say to your party, like, do you mind hanging out for 4 hours so I can make these arrows?
Your party wakes up to the smell of delicious fire resistance potions.
Right, exactly. But that, again, that's incorporating what's on your sheet, incorporating instances to inspire roleplay, and that's kind of where these rules 7 and 8 for crafting and crafting healing potions, or potions in general, come into play. Now, rule number 9, minions. Some stronger enemies are going to have minions. Minions, in my opinion, are one hits. I don't even track their health. Like, if you roll to hit and you hit, doesn't matter what the damage is, you're going to kill it. Some minions for stronger enemies are going to be 2 to 3 hits. Still, I'm not going to track their health because they're meant to cause a little bit of chaos on the battlefield and take away your focus from the bad guy. For example, we just played a game. It wasn't streamed. But we played a game where our party was fighting an adult blue dragon who had some gargoyles as minions. Now, he had a bomb that he threw and blew it up, and the damage would have been so much that it vaporized. I think there were 3 in that corner. It vaporized 2 of them.
There was 4.
4.
There was 4, and the other 2 were badly injured. Yeah.
Yeah. So while the ones in the front were vaporized, the ones in the back, in logical sense, took less of a blow because they had a little bit of cover from the 2 that were standing in front of them. They were down to 1 hit left. So on someone else's turn, they're like, these guys are hurt, let's get them. But now that's 2 players' turns taking them out, and 2 players' turns that are not going to my bad guy, right? So minions, a lot of people do minions. I think even like 4th edition or 3rd, I don't really know the older editions of D&D, but they were 1 hit point each. But the point of having minions isn't that they're going to do a lot of damage or such, but they're mainly going to take away action economy from the actual bad guy.
Right. It's like a speed bump in the road. We're trying to slow you down a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'll use minions in that way, but behind my screen, I know which ones are 1 hits and which ones might be 2. At most, I might have a minion be a 3 hit, but I'm not going to do that often. But that's the thing. And when they have a turn, whatever their turn is, and they're usually not going to be spellcasters, they're going to be some kind of creature that has melee, bite, claw, something like that.
Short sword.
I'm going to roll to see if they hit. And when they have damage, whatever the average damage is listed on that stat block, that's what they get. Because my minions, I want them to move quickly. I've got 3 minions, I'm rolling 3 d20s, right? Mm-hmm. I got 2 hits, and they both use their short bow, and that average damage is 6. You take 12, because both of them aimed at you, right? Like, I'm going to keep things moving with my minions. I also will give minions, this is very inside baseball, right? And this is something he doesn't even know. I also give my minions a special feature. Now, one of them is called Meat Shield, where if they are close enough to the target, the big bad guy they're protecting, they will use their reaction to dive in front of the blow and take the hit. There might be a minion who is a shield generator, where maybe that minion has some kind of magical power or magical item on them that is absorbing damage from my bad guy. And he's not taking the damage, his item is taking the damage. And if he takes enough damage, that thing will break. And then now my bad guy's exposed. So they could be hitting I just hit this dragon for 26 damage. No, you didn't. Because my minion has an item that absorbs up to 35 hit points of damage. You think you did 26 damage, but my little shield generator is the one who is absorbing.
So you use minions as kind of like a wild card.
Yeah.
Like, because they could just disrupt, they could heal, they could do all sorts of different things without you knowing that they're so limited in their health pool.
Right. And so, like, I know which ones have what, right? So I might keep the shield generator close to my bad guy at all times, but if he has a downed opponent near him, and maybe like one minion or my bad guy knocked you down, and they now turn their focus elsewhere, my little shield generator is going to go, but he's still breathing. And now he might go over there and try to kill, but now he's too far away from my bad guy.
Right.
And he's going to start taking some damage. I do give them free will. For the most part, the minions are going to, shield generators specifically, are going to be as close to my bad guy as possible. But sometimes, if given an opportunity to impress bad guy, they're going to do that. So I'm going to be like, I think he'll be okay. I'm going to go kill this guy so he doesn't get up and try and attack us. Stab, stab, stab.
Right.
I might do that. But minions are in my game, in our table. And like I said, the recap summary, it's a lot of stuff he doesn't even know. And now he's going to be like, oh shit.
I'm taking notes. No, minions, what I notice is a lot of, I shouldn't say a lot, I've noticed some DMs, when they make encounters, the enemies are always armor clad in something. Even if it's just that studded leather. They're always clad in some kind of armor. You don't see it very often where it's just like a minion goblin that has just torn clothes. You know, he's just a subjugated little slave. So he's got torn clothes and the boss is yelling at him, go get him. And he's got no weapon and he's like, okay, because he's scared, right? You don't encounter a lot of those. Most encounters that you see in game that involve fighting, the enemy's always clad in some kind of armor, even if it's basic. So you don't see a lot of minions that are just like, they're just fodder, cannon fodder and even the boss knows it. Just cannon fodder, get in the way, give me time to escape or something. You don't see a lot of it. So minions, even though we might use them, I don't see them a lot.
Yeah.
You know, I see them. I'm not saying they don't exist. I see them, but they're not used very much. Usually encounters are heavily war-focused engagements rather than these little skirmishes.
And I like using minions in that way just because, like, again, and you can look back from the beginning of this video and go forward and you're like, wow, you're giving your players a lot of access to do a lot of damage against your bad guys. Yes, but
there's also a lot of bad guys.
I also have a lot of bad guys, or I have minions and those minions do something.
Right.
So I stretch out the encounter that way and make it thus more dangerous.
Right. You guys have so much availability to do all this kind of damage and all this extra stuff. Yeah, well, when you're going up against a boss who has lieutenants, who has henchmen, who in turn have minions, there's 24 people on the board and you're a party of 5. Yeah, you're going to need to be able to output kind of damage to get anywhere and make it through anything. But at the same time, it's also a challenge because these little things are, even though they're 1 or 2 or a few hit points, they're annoying because they're taking pot shots at you. They're swarming you. They're gathering all around you. They're getting advantage because they have you flanked. There's a bunch of them surrounding you. Like, it's annoying. Pack tactics. A perfect example of that. And it's like, there's a lot there that you could play with too. And it makes sense. And I know that and we've seen it, you try to find a happy balance between not flooding the board with all these little guys that are easy to take out, but having it like a healthy mix. We got some guys that you're going to take some time to take this guy down. But the guy who you're holding off with your hand on his forehead and he's swinging at you off to the side, just stick him real quick. It makes sense to have these mixtures, and it makes it fun. It makes you go, when you first uncover it and you see all the enemy minis on the board, you go, what's happening right now? Right. You get worried because we don't know.
I live for that.
We don't know who's the minion and who's the henchman and who's the ranking.
I distinctly remember a session where we played, and you guys just annihilated my encounter.
Anything that moved.
And afterwards, you were like, that was a little easy for us. And I wish there was sometimes the encounters are super dangerous and sometimes they're light. I'm like, well, that's natural. Like, not everything you're going to come across
is life-threatening,
is going to be life-threatening. But at the same time, it's like, for so long, you just didn't know that these were minions, and they were only designed to take your focus off the thing. So let's say it took you, 3-4 turns within a round of characters ganging up on the minions to wipe them off the board. Those are 3 or 4 turns that you didn't spend on him.
Right.
And by the time the big bad evil guy, whatever it is going to die, those 3-4 turns that you spent doing this, as they carry on in the combat, those 3-4 turns might get to his next turn where he regenerates some health
Right.
or gets his reactions
Or a
back.
legendary action. Yeah.
So for y'all, it's like, yes, we're wiping out all the minions, and now we're going to focus fire on the bad guy. And I'm like, yes, focus fire on the bad guy. Go. You do those things with those minions because I have a plan. And that's why I like using minions in that way. But again, I'm not going to make them OP. They're usually not going to have an extra attack. They're going to do average damage.
It's not in every single encounter.
And it's easy for me as a DM to track because I don't. If I've got 12 minions on the board, which isn't often, I don't have to keep track of 12 individuals. I just number them. Sometimes when we start streaming, you're going to see that some of them have little stickers on their base with colors. So, all right, pink is dead, green is dead, orange is alive. Like, I'll do that, and I'll just put a little X. This one's dead, and I'll just remove them off the board as they go. But like,
that actually would be smarter. What he does right now, what we do right now is we go, that mini's holding one sword. All right, one sword's dead. Mm-hmm. That mini's holding Kane. Kane's gone.
Yeah.
Blue hair's
pants.
gone.
Blue
Pointy
pants is dead.
shoes just went down. So naming it colors and numbers makes more sense, but he don't do that right now. He'll start doing that.
Can
but
somebody take blue pants off the board? That's what we do.
we don't sit there and think about it. It's just, all right, take pointy shoes. Twinkle toes is gone.
Yeah.
But minions can be fun, but they don't have to be, you don't have to cram them into every single fight. You can have an encounter with just minions and it can be fun.
Right. That's true. That's going to bring us to our last rule. This one's my favorite one. Death saving throws. So, typically how death saving throws work is you're a player and I knock you down to 0 hit points or beyond. Beyond 0 doesn't mean anything, by the way. Unless you get the excess damage. Once I take you down to 0, whatever's left over, if that exceeds your max, you're dead. There is no death saving throws. You're annihilated. But death saving throws, and the way that we do them, I think rules as written, on your next turn, you start rolling death saves.
Right.
And all that really means is you're taking your d20 and you're rolling it. You're adding nothing to it. On rolls that equal 10 or higher, you get 1 success. If you roll if you roll under a 10, you get 1 fail. If you roll a natural 1, that counts as 2 fails, where if you roll a natural 20, you actually wake up with 1 hit point. So rolling a 1 is 2 fails, 2 through 9 is 1 fail, 10 through 19 is a success, natural 20 you wake up with 1 hit point. That's rules as written. And you make those rolls on your turn. It's not how we do them at our table. First of all, I will always ask, do you want me to roll your death saving throws or would you like to roll them? Mm-hmm. And the reason I offer that is as the DM, if I make the roll behind the screen, he's dead. His player agency is gone. And so he'll be feeling it a little bit more if I'm doing death saves and he has no idea what I just rolled.
Right. Am I going to wake up? Am I conscious? Because I'm unconscious. I don't know what's happening.
The
so
funny
I can't.
thing is, I eyeballed that camera while I rolled that, and I just rolled a
Nat 20. So I'm up.
This is what I do.
That's how easy it is.
Right.
No, he just made it look easy. It is not usually does not end up that way. That's just a fluke. I don't know how that just happened. I watched him do it. It is a 20. But normally that doesn't happen. But it heightens the experience. Mm-hmm. It makes it keeps you on edge. It's suspenseful.
Now, if you want to roll them, you can roll them. But what I would prefer...
It's more fun to DM do it, in my opinion. But
I would prefer, if you're going to roll your own death saves, that you do it behind my screen. Because I don't want the person sitting next to you to see it. Because I don't want anybody to metagame that situation. What I mean by that is...
That's the key.
Somebody who has a stockpile of healing potions, or somebody with a paladin with lay on hands, or a druid, a cleric, somebody with healing spells, or a reviving spell. I don't want them to be like, all right, well, he rolled an 11. He's got 1 success. I'm going to attack the monster. He's okay right now.
That's meta.
You shouldn't know that.
That's metagaming, yeah.
If anything, you saw your comrade fall dead, and if you're going to do something, you do it now. You run to that person, and you heal them, you revive them, and you do it now. So, by me rolling it, I always take a picture with my phone so you know what I rolled after the fact. I'm not going to send it to you, but like if you die, I have proof that I didn't meta you die or I didn't force a death. Like I'm going to roll it. You see me roll. You see my hands. You see me take my picture. You've seen it before. I've done it. And then I'll just keep going. Okay. But on your turn, right? Oh, and by the way, the moment you fall, that's your first death saving throw right now. I'm not going to wait for your turn for you to start dying.
That doesn't make sense. Yeah.
You start dying right now. So you're like, I'd tell you, okay, I got you for 23 damage. You're like, I'm down. I'm like, okay, we're going to make a death saving throw. Do you want to do it or do you want me to do it? And either way, whoever's doing it is going to do it behind the screen. So he rolls and we mark it off, right? If you get 3 fails before you get 3 successes, you're dead. If you get 3 successes before you get 3 fails, you wake up with 0 hit. Well, you don't wake up. You're stable at 0 hit points, but you're unconscious, but you're breathing. So as soon as you go down, death save number 1 takes place. Then on your turn, the second one happens. But in a moment of role play, I'm going to be like, your life is flashing before your eyes. What is it that you're experiencing? Because this is a moment for you to dive into your backstory and give us something you haven't given us.
Before you die.
Like, I picture my stuffed ogre toy that I loved when I was a kid. And my life is flashing before my eyes, I remember my hand pushing the door aside and seeing that laying on my bed and the comfort it gave me when I had it during like a thunderstorm or something. I'm like, great, roll a death saving throw. So the players around them are realizing, oh my God, his life is flashing before his eyes.
This is a serious thing.
He is actively dying.
Yeah.
And you and the table don't know where you are. So there were times where I've rolled a natural 20 and I go, let's say your character Zigzag, for example. You know that I've rolled once already. And I'm like, okay. And we get to your turn and I'm having you explain and then I roll that second throw. If I nat 20 that throw, I'm going to be like, as you reach for that stuffed ogre and your fingertips just touch it, you feel this burst of energy and you open your eyes.
Right, it's much more dramatic.
You're like, oh, thank God he just crit rolled that.
It puts a lot more weight on the... That's the thing I don't get about... And this might be a little bit off on tangent too. Is like, people don't... Like, of course, everybody likes their characters. Some of us get more overly attached to our characters than others. But you'll see some people who like, they're in the midst of death saves or they go down and it's like, they're like, oh no. And they're worried. They're visibly worried. Well, when it comes to like death saving throws, I know it's metagaming when you're like, oh, like you said, oh, he rolled an 11. He's okay for right now. I'm going to attack. Guys. Right. That's metagaming. But in character, you could technically roll medicine to see if you could see where that person's at. Of course, that, again, we play rule of the dice, right? It's rule of the die. The die rules all. If you roll high on medicine, you'll be able to tell where he's at and how close he is to death. If you fail on it, though, you won't. But I don't see people doing that. I always see people saying, oh, he's down. Oh, like you said, oh, he rolled an 11. All right, I'm going to attack this round before I make it over. That's meta. We're so against, we hate meta. And we catch ourselves, we bust ourselves doing it. We bust each other doing it from time to time. We don't like that. A lot of this stuff, if you look at it and you look at it from that point of view, a lot of these rules is like, there's a lot of anti-meta theme in it that keeps you from using your knowledge as a player affecting your knowledge in game as a character. And that's essentially that's why this one's a big one for us, because there's a lot of meta that can go on with this, and we want to try to avoid that. But we also the DM wants you to feel the weight of this death. Like, oh, it's no big deal. I got a backup character. Nah, dude. Like,
that one too.
Like, I don't care if I'm level 6, right? I'm not that deep into the character, and I make a bad decision and my character dies. That sucks for me. I put a lot of time, a lot of effort into the thought, into their personality, into their background. That sucks for me. And doing it the way that you do it with this, all right, describe to me what you're seeing. Are you seeing anything? Are you feeling anything? it adds that dramatic weight. And if your character does die, like you said, it gives you an opportunity to expend any background lore or any background information about your character that your teammates might not have previously known. It's a chance for the players, not the characters, but the players behind them to get a little bit of information on who your character was before you pass.
And I, as a DM, could use that information. So, let's say you make your first death saving throw, and I say, "What do you see as your life flashes before your eyes?" And you start talking about your mother. And the character and the party know that your mother had passed, as part of your backstory, and you didn't really talk about it. Oh, my parents aren't around anymore. My mother, she was great. Da 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 da. Sometimes that comes out in like natural role play, right? But if you start saying like, I see my mother and how beautiful she was, as she just is sitting, and a sunshine coming through the window, beaming on her at a table, and she's made a fresh loaf of bread, and I can smell it. I miss my mom's bread, and that's what I see, right? Okay, great. What I might do then, when I make the next death save, is take that and twist what you gave me and allow you to react to that while you're dying. So, for example, while your mother is sitting at the table with the fresh bread, she's beckoning you to come to her. And her foot slides a stool out for you to sit. And you hear your mother's voice for the first time in years go, "Come, child, sit with me." And that seat is basking in that light.
Right, you can choose to sit or not, or...
I've rolled, and I'm like, she's tempting you, and I'll leave it there. I'm like, okay, next. And now you're sitting there going...
This is my final death.
Do I go? Because you might make that character choice to be like...
Yeah, this is peace.
I'm going to go. Mm-hmm. Then you're dead. Like, you can make that decision.
Right.
And then, especially if you're picking up what I'm leaving you, right? You can make that character choice right there. Let's stop rolling. You exhale your last breath in the comfort of your mother's warm embrace. And the rest of the party's going like this.
Right. Everybody feels the weight of that loss. And now it's not just...
the players are doing it.
Well, yeah.
The player characters are just like, we need to save him. They
have no idea.
And if they bring you back, you're like, why did you do that? When you wake up, you could...
Right. You could be angry.
That could be a whole thing.
There's so many routes that you could go with it. Plus, keep in mind, you're probably listening to all this and you're like, oh, that's really cool. That's awesome to add some death, and that's an interesting way to do it. Keep in mind, that's for death saving throws. If you get annihilated by a boss with you're dead. There's no tell me what you're experiencing. You got hit with, a ray of sun or something. It's over. Mm-hmm. There's no. I'm imagining sinking into a warm bath with you're dust.
Yeah, you disintegrate and it drops you to zero. You're dust.
So it only works on death throws, but it's such an interesting way to cover it from so many different angles. From a storytelling point of view, you're getting the other players involved too. They might get emotionally involved in trying to help save your character. Right? It gives them a hint as to where you're at. Whether you're on you're checking out or you're coming to. Mm-hmm. So many ways that you can do it, and I think it's amazing how little things like these get so easily overlooked because of the fact that there's so much you can do with it, and people don't notice that. Like from a role, some people are more role play heavy, and that's fine. Some people are more focused on the actions, like I want to solve puzzles, I want to steal, I want to solve this murder, I want to do that, I want to fight. We get all that. Mm-hmm. But in the end, there's little facets of these games that are house rules for us and that are set in stone rules for the D&D community that if you look at it just a little bit closer, you can bend them, you can manipulate, you can have them, and you can tweak them to be your own just like you do with a campaign or a character. We just wanted to give you some examples of what we do. Some of the things that we do maybe might inspire you, or maybe you might go, hey guys, you know what? That sounds interesting. Have you ever tried this? And we might learn something. That's what this is all about. It's all about the entertainment value and learning and expanding our knowledge of this game.
Yep. And there's probably so many more homebrew-esque versions of rules that we use. These are the 10 that really stood out to us. We wanted to bring to you because I think they're the most obvious ones. If and when we start streaming our campaign, that you might pick up on, and we'll point back to this video to help you.
Or bust
understand what
us,
we're doing.
bust our chops if we do something wrong. Be like, hey, you guys said it and you didn't follow your.
That's true.
We're human. We
do
make
that
mistakes.
too.
So
Yeah. But I love hearing other people's stuff, like
Yeah, me
the
too.
critical damage. Like Dungeon Dudes do that, Realmsmith does that. I love it. I think it's the way that critical damage should go. And it's funny too, because like that's one where like I feel like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth. I'm like, let the dice tell the story, okay, Matt. But if the dice roll terribly on your crit roll, you're
Right.
not gonna. I understand I'm doing that. However, it's not. I play D&D not for me as the DM. It's for the players, and the amount of times that someone might crit roll down, critically hit something. There are times where I've seen someone do it 2-3 times in a session. I've seen it happen where it does not happen for 5-6 sessions, and finally somebody crits. Like that's who I'm doing it for. Is I want to maximize the damage output because it is a critical hit, and there's nothing critical about 4 damage. There just isn't.
Right.
So yeah. But anyway, those are our house rules that really stand out to us that we felt like we wanted to share and bring to you. Please let us know what your thoughts are. What are some homebrew rules or house rules that you have? Throw them in the comments. We would love to see them. Because like you said, we might find your rule better than ours and incorporate it.
Yeah, we reserve the right to steal any ideas that you
All
post
of
on the channel. If it's good, we're going to use it. And we'll give you a shout out. We'll even say, hey, we read this by so-and-so. We're going to incorporate that. That's great.
Yeah.
We love to hear other people's ideas because our ideas didn't start off this way, right? We built to this. As we learned the game, as we played the game, as we experienced different groups of people in different scenarios, this just all started to take form on its own, and it just came up in discussion. We're like, we should really talk about this, because there's nothing worse than going into a session where everybody disagrees on a main function of the game, on how it works. That's annoying. Where somebody like stops a game and they go, well, wait, it says this. I always meant it to be this. We're like, well, we don't play that way. It's always good to get these things out in the open and agreed upon before starting, so there's no argument and there's no holding up the game mid-battle to argue these things out and debate them.
Yeah, like generally we'll hear both sides. I'll make a ruling, move on, and then at the end of the session be like, all right, now let's go back to that.
Right. And we'll amend the house rules.
Yep.
Right. We'll change things, and that's what it's all about. It's always evolving. It's always. I already told him before we started. I'm like, there's a couple things we could add on here, and we might. So we'd love to hear from you either way.
Yeah. We'll do another one of these too as they evolve, but those are the ones that stood out to us the most and we wanted to share. So appreciate you hanging and listening to us chit chat about this. Like I said, throw your comments in, like and subscribe if you haven't already. And we're going to continue talking about homebrew and diving into our homebrew world. How do we make magic items ourselves? How do we make creatures ourselves? How do we create a world build? How do we fill it in? We're going to have a series of videos like that that this is pretty much going to kick off. So if you're interested in homebrew and how to do it and how we do it might inspire you and you might inspire us, keep coming back to us. And until then, keep those dice rolling and we'll see you at the table.